BBC4 Collections, specially chosen programmes from the BBC archive. For this collection, Max Hastings has selected interviews with Great War veterans filmed in the 1960s. More programmes on this theme and other BBC4 collections are available on BBC iPlayer.
I was a young soldier of 17, just before the war. I joined a territorial regiment for the sport and the boxing and swimming. And when, on the 3rd of August 1914, mobilization orders came out, we were all very excited and apprehensive. Because the whole feeling in the air was one of anxiety, at the same time great endeavor, and most of us wanted to be out in France before the war was over by Christmas. It was a great thing, said by the papers, was it would be over by Christmas, largely because of the Russian steamroller. Well, we were mobilized, we had our bayonets sharpened, taken away in wheelbarrows and put on a grindstone by the armourers down below. When they came back, we were a little bit nervous about this sharpness, and we realized the other side had bayonets also. And one morning, after being about 10 days in London, sleeping in various schools, it was August and holiday time, we marched out of London with bugles playing and the fife band playing and the drums. Tremendous excitement, cheered with the crowds, people standing up on the tops of motor buses and raising their hats. And we felt pretty fine. But when we came to London Bridge, we were told to break step. Otherwise, the pounding of 1,000 nail boots at the same time might shake the foundations. We went down into Surrey. We heard that many of our sister battalions of the London Regiment were also on this divisional march, and we were concentrating on the coast because we thought there might be an invasion. Of course, the air was full of rumours. It was also full of dust because it was a month of great heat. We sweated tremendously. We carried about 60 pounds of ammunition and kit, our rifle. We got blisters. If we did about 15 or 16 miles a day, 10 minutes halt every hour, we lay on our backs, gasping. Water bottles were drunk dry. People in cottages, women in sunbonnets came out with apples and jugs of water. And we passed some of the battalions who had been in front of us, whose headquarters were in some of the poorer quarters of London. And I remember so well the dead white faces, many with boils, lying completely exhausted, sun-stricken in the hedges, hundreds of them. We, who considered ourselves one of the elite regiments, battalions of the London Regiment, that is the London Scottish, Queen Victoria's and the London Rifle Brigade, to which I belonged, we did not fall out. But then we had been more fortunate and had proper nourishment before the great march began. Well, we were down in Surrey, and we had great field days, and this glorious August weather kept on. And one morning we heard that we were going overseas, those who wished to volunteer, because the territorials had joined only for home service. Most of us volunteered, because at that time we'd heard of the retreat from Mons, and one or two soldiers had come home from the regular army, and we'd met them, wounded, slightly wounded, and they told tales of horror and devastation. And we were completely shocked. Then the news came through of the great retreat, and the losses, and the onslaught of the Germans. And of course, all the papers for some days had been full of atrocities, which were pretty severe. And I suppose we believed them. It was still a very small world, and we volunteered to go out. after a couple of months, our orders came through. And when they came through, I remember in the tented lines on Crowborough Heath, most of the fellows cheered and rolled over. They came down early in the morning, the news through the colour sergeant of the company, rolled over and kicked their legs in the air, and cheered and cheered and cheered, tremendously excited. I wasn't excited. I was apprehensive. I didn't believe the war was going to be over by Christmas. I had a feeling from having talked to two of the chaps from Mons in the local hospital that it wasn't going to be altogether a picnic. It would be true to say that we enjoyed our first visit to the trenches. The weather was dry. We went through a wood under Messines Hill, south of Ypres. We were brigaded with regulars who wore balaclava helmets and had beards, and the whole feeling was one of tremendous comradeship. And these old sweats, who were the survivors of Mons and Aisne, they had no fear at all. Any apprehension we had when going in under fire was soon gone. They were in the trenches, and we enjoyed it. As I say, the weather was dry. The wood had a number of pheasants in and rabbits. We would have our ration bacon and tea and white bread, and we'd hop out the back of the trenches, risking the snipers, and make our fires 50 or 60 yards in among the trees. We also enjoyed the phenomenon that was known as wind-up. The battles had died down in our sector under Messines Hill, but they were still going on up at Ypres. And at night one would hear the crackle of musketry far away. And then these, what I call the lilies of the dead, the flares going up and slowly sinking down and giving this powdery greenish light. They were sinking down under parachutes. German lights much better than ours. And they would come down the line, you'd see them. And you'd hear the machine guns going, and they'd sweep down, we'd order to stand to, and we'd fire into no man's land, about 80 yards from the Germans. And we'd see perhaps figures darting about and coming forward, and then lying flat, and then going back. And this would go down south at a great rate, travelling about 15 to 20 miles an hour, I should think. Then it would die out. It was known as the nightly wind-up. Well, our time in the trenches was very happy. We had one or two men sniped, which was rather a shocking sight, but it was war, and we accepted it. We accepted the dead bodies lying out just in front. We accepted the fact we had to go out sometimes on listening patrol within 10 yards of the German lines and lie down and listen, see if they were assembling for an attack, and then go back. And I can honestly say there was no fear at all. It was a picnic. One night, in the second week of November, there was a tremendous storm of rain, lightning, flares still going up, water, raindrops splashing up 9 or 10 inches in no man's land, and it went on and on and on and on. That stopped the first Battle of Ypres, which was raging up north, our sector, north of Armentières. It ceased. The actual fighting, the dead were lying out in front. The rains kept on. We were in yellow clay. The water table was 2 feet below. Our trenches were 7 feet deep. We walked about, or moved very slowly, in a marn or a pug of yellow, watery clay. When the evening came, we could get out. It took about an hour to get out. Some of our chaps slipped in and were drowned and weren't seen until we trod on, perhaps later. The condition of the latrines, you can be imagined. And we couldn't sleep. Every minute was like an hour. And when were we going to be relieved? We were told we couldn't be relieved. There was nobody. They hadn't one battalion in reserve in the British Expeditionary Force, except those out in support, who would go out for a few days. And we were 4 days in this dreadful trench called the Hampshire Tea Trench. It was 60 yards from the Germans, and they could snipe right down it, and we had a lot of men sniped. I had my friend standing beside me. We were trying to work a pump which the engineers had brought in, or we'd carried it in at night. It wouldn't work. We found afterwards it was connected the wrong way around. The outlet pipe was on the inlet side, and we pumped for a long time, nothing happened. And suddenly there was a tremendous crack, going like that, right at the clackmore of a bullet, which really, as we know now, breaks the sound barrier. Incidentally, they used to say that they used explosive bullets, the Germans. Now this hit my friend in the front of the head and took away the back of his head, and he fell down, just slipped down. Well, we were relieved after the fourth night, and some of us had to be carried out. I noticed that so many of the tough ones were carried out, and the skinny little whippersnaps like myself somehow could, perhaps we hadn't got the weight to carry, but we got out somehow. We marched back, and we could go in the staminays and have cafe rum for about a halfpenny, and omelettes, and it was great fun. We had to go working party tonight in the wood. That was all night long. And after 4 more nights, we were in the trenches again, back slithering into this Hampshire tea trench, doing it all over again. The paths through Plug Street Wood, they got pretty bad, up to a foot deep in mud. We had to carry rations. And what was pretty boring was the tobacco that we had to carry, the tins of tobacco. The rations were then 10,000 cigarettes a day, or 5 pounds of pipe tobacco, because many funds sponsored by newspapers, comforts for the troops. And one of the things we loathed carrying were these biscuit boxes, which were cubes of bright metal, about 18 inches cubic. And of course they were seen. And Jerry, or the alley man, as we called him, from the Almo, Jerry hadn't appeared then as a name. The alley man would then fire his machine guns. And all the chips would fly down from the oak woods and fall on us, and didn't give a damn, except that if we'd take the occasion to dump this blasted biscuit box in a shell hole, where many others lay beside it. And we were overjoyed when the heavy frosts came and the mud ceased. We had to clear out of the Hampshire tea trench. It was untenable. It was half ice, and had so many men sniped that it was left abandoned. And when the frost came, we would try and sleep, and our boots would freeze. It was very painful. We weren't allowed to take them off. So some of us walked about at night and swing the arms to keep warm. And the greatcoats, of course, were frozen, and the yellow clay that was on them was frozen too. Very hard to get it off. It's a great weight. Being stiff as boards, we just hacked the skirt off about 2 feet up the skirt with bayonets and walked about in short coats. And then we had an issue of goat skins. And these were like jerkins. They no arms, they just armholes, and they were fastened by tapes. And they were pretty warm, but they didn't warm the feet, of course, these frozen boots. And about many of our chaps went down with frostbite when the boots were taken off in the billet. The feet swelled up like tomatoes, and some of them got gangrene and had to lose their feet. But that was in the hospitals when they went down. On the 19th of December, the brigade was ordered to make an attack on part of the German trench which enfiladed the Hampshire tea trench. The attack was to be made in daylight, and to get over the German wire, palliasses of straw were made to be carried and thrown over the wire, and the men to run over the straw hurdles. We were in support of this attack. we were ordered to lie down at the edge of the wood and wait events. There was practically no bombardment because of very few shells. I think the ration was 2 a day for our heavy guns, our 6-inch long toms, they were called. But the shells screamed over half a dozen, lyddite. 2 of them burst in our front trench, 4 burst in no man's land. And then, hoarsely cheering, we heard the hoarse cries and the shouts of the Lancashires, East Lancs, who were making the attack. And they were only about 5 or 6 yards, running forward, round the shell holes filled with ice, and the machine guns opened up, and down they went. Cries and screams. And we were in support, lying there for 3 or 4 hours. Then the order came. The London Rifle Brigade will carry on the attack. The order was not actually to start, but to prepare for it. I noticed my friend Baldwin on my left. He had an ashen white face. I felt drained out. And when I tried to get up, I couldn't. My knees were wobbling. And we lay there another half hour, and heard with great relief that the attack was not to be repeated. We went out later, helped get in the wounded with stretcher bearers. And I remember one man being brought back, and on the stretcher, when he was safely inside the wound, being carried away, he sang in a light tenor voice, "Oh, for the wings of a dove, far, far away would I rove," because he was said to a choir, just to sing in a church choir before the war. And far away in the woods, as we went back rejoicing to have our rum ration, we heard this voice singing as the stars came out. But one poor chap with us, he took a first sip of the rum and gave a shriek and dropped the jar because some fellow back in the rear had stolen the rum and filled the jar with condensed fluid, which was brown. This fellow had taken a mouthful, and it went down into his stomach. We heard he died later. On Christmas Eve, we had a job to do in no man's land, which put the wind up everybody. That is to say, we were all quiet among ourselves. The job was to go into frozen no man's land and drive in some stakes, which were to support hurdles on which some tobacco had been drying in a barn in the woods, because it was all abandoned by the Belgians. And we were to make a sort of alleyway or cover from view, so that in the event of a German attack, we could reoccupy the Hampshire Tea Trench, which had been abandoned owing to the floods in it, because that was a key position. Now, it was explained to us that we had to knock in these posts 18 inches into this frozen soil, and we'd be 50 yards away from the Germans, and if we crept out, trying to avoid our boots ringing on the frozen ground, and expecting any moment to fall flat with the machine guns opening up, and nothing happened. And within 2 hours, we were walking about and laughing and talking, and there was nothing from the German lines. And then about 11 o'clock, I saw a Christmas tree going up on the German trenches, and there was a light. And we stood still, and we watched this, and we talked. And then a German voice began to sing a song, Heilige Nacht. And after that, somebody, "Come over, Tommy, come over." And they still thought it was a trap. But some of us went over at once, and they came to this barbed wire fence between us, which was 5 strands of wire, hung with empty bully beef tins, to make a rattle as they came. And very soon we were exchanging gifts. The next day, we went out again. The whole of no man's land, as far as we could see, was grey and khaki. There they were, smoking and talking, shaking hands, exchanging names and addresses after the war to write to one another. We had a splendid present from Princess Mary, a brass box with her young face and head embossed on it, and tobacco inside, a packet of tobacco and a packet of 20 cigarettes with a Christmas card. And the Germans had also presents, and they had, some of them had meerschaum pipes with the figure of the Crown Prince's head on it. And, of course, we thought Little Willie, as we called him, was a little bit of an ass. But it was rather a shock to be told. As a Saxon held up this pipe to show me, and he said, "Prachtige Kerl, Kronprinz." And somebody who spoke German translated, "Prachtige Kerl" was jolly good fellow. The Germans started burying their dead, frozen out, and we picked up ours and buried them. And little crosses of ration box wood were nailed together, quite small ones, and indelible pencil they would put, the Germans, "Für Vaterland und Freiheit," for fatherland and freedom. And I said to a German, "Excuse me, but how can you be fighting for freedom? You started the war, and we are fighting for freedom." And he said, "Excuse me, English comrade, camarade, but we are fighting for freedom, for our country." And I say, you also put, "Here rests in God an unbekannter, held. Here rests in God an unknown hero, in God." Oh yes, God is on our side. Blessed He's on our side. And that was a tremendous shock when we began to think that these chaps, who were like ourselves, whom we liked, and who felt about the wars we did, and who said, "It'll be over soon because we will win the war in Russia." And we said, "No, but the Russian steamroller is going to win the war in Russia." Well, English comrade, do not let us quarrel on Christmas Day. And we exchanged more gifts, and there was a football match behind the German lines. And we saw, we had seen before this, 5 or 6 German lines of the men, 200-300 yards apart, all standing up in the distance on their parapets, and we only had one trench. There was nothing behind us at all. I talked to an officer the next day, because the truce went on for several days, and he said, "You know, we could not have gone on in the first Battle of Ypres, or Ypres you call it, because you had so many reserves in your woods, and so many automatische pistols." I said, "Well, all the machine guns gone, they're all knocked out?" And he said, "Oh no, your automatische pistol. It was our 15 rounds rapid." We also learned that many of the German mass attacks were made by boys, German students of 16 and 17, arm in arm with one rifle among 3. The truce went on for 4 days. In the morning we'd come out of the wood and wave to our opposite numbers, and we'd come and talk again. Then the order came round. It was the fraternization had to stop, and the Germans sent over a note saying their staff was visiting their trenches that night. The truce must end, and they would have to fire their machine guns. They would fire them high, but would we in any case keep under cover in case regrettable accidents occurred. And 11 o'clock, precisely, they opened up, and we saw the flashes of the machine guns going high, and it was passed back to intelligence that the Germans were using Berlin time in the trenches, which was 1 hour before British time, which was, I suppose, an important item of intelligence. And that was the end of our truce. I loved my mules and the horses that I looked after, but there was great suffering during that winter of the Somme. They had mud rash. They could seldom be groomed. They were working all night, most of the day on fatigues. And after a bit, you'd see one of your donks, as they were called, pulling the limbers, would be going along very slowly, as usual, and picking its way. It was gentle creatures. One of its ears would go down. And then, perhaps the next night, or the next day, following, the second ear would go down. And then in the morning, when you went to your picket line, the man on picket duty would say, "Jimmy's gone, sir," or "Nelson's gone, he was the one I'd know." And there they were, lying down in the mud, with a glazed eye, dead of pneumonia. The Battle of the Somme officially ended in November 1916. But the shelling went on. The nightly work went on. The troops went into the line, and I, who was in charge of the transport for a machine gun company, used to go nightly up railway road, which lay between the two flanks of the Somme battle. To the south, the Tiefval and the Wonderwerk and the Schwaben Redoubt, and to the north, up to Beaumont-Hamel and Gommecourt. And one February of 1917, I remember, we were going up Railway Road, expecting nightly the shelling, and usually lost a mule or two, and we were not shelled, and we wondered what had happened. And then we heard that the old Hun, as we called him, was pulling out. He pulled out his heavy howitzers. He'd gone. And then we saw the cavalry come up. The Bengal lancers trotted past. It was a wonderful sight. Rumours all round the news that was he going? Was he packing up altogether? He was going into the Siegfried Stellung. We read in comic cuts. And bit by bit we followed. Our patrols went out. They did very good rearguard action. Delayed our advance. And at last we got onto green fields and roads that weren't shelled. All the railway lines had been picked up, all the buildings had been blown up, but it was almost virgin country. And we could gallop on the downs, we could see the hares and see the larks. And after the months and months of utter brownness and chaos and everything going back into ruin, to see that open country again was marvellous. And there on the horizon to the east we saw heavy howitzers already starting to bombard the Hindenburg.